So a lot of folks will probably notice that you kind of hit this plateau where it stops kind of giving you as full or as helpful of an answer. It takes longer. It has errors. And so that's how most people are using AI. And even for a little tiny change, like, at the end, you're actually asking it to recalculate the entire chat conversation. And if you use Grantable, what we're doing is we're using a mix of different models.
Back on the show with me is Phil Deng. He is the co-founder and CEO of Grantable. And man, they're awesome. They're AI for grant writing. Like, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that again. We talked about other things, but I wanted you to, I was like, oh, come back on. We're going to talk about like what's going on today. We're recording this in May 2025. I wanted to know, how's it going with AI and grant writing? What's happening? Give us the tea. Right? So thank you for coming back on, Phil. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, Holly, the first time we did this, it still stands out as the top for my podcasting experiences. So I'm just here for the party. So it's always fun to be here. Just keep asking me back, and maybe someday I'll start one of these things and have you on. But always great to be with you and your audience. So AI and grants. I mean, I guess remember ChatGPT was November 2022. 2023 was sort of like, oh my gosh, AI, mostly ChatGPT. 2024 is now behind us, where I think I would say we all kind of started to take this as a given, that this is the tech that's going to kind of be in all of our work in some kind of way. Images, text, audio, video, all this kind of stuff. 2025 is a continuation, I would say. And I think the way that it's characterized right now is that a lot more folks are entering the grant space, and specifically the writing space for AI. Grantable was first by a couple of years, and we still think we have the best product, but there are folks that are on our side of the fence where they're seeing the potential of taking this technology, large language models, and helping to work on the writing, the assembly part of grants. There's always been tech for prospecting and grant management, but we've always, prior to this, just Microsoft Word or Google Docs, wherever you do your writing, that's been the software. So I think AI is coming into it. We are basically, we're seeing the top models continue to be from OpenAI and Anthropic, at least in the US. There's some Chinese companies that are creating really kind of news-making models as well. Some of your folks might have heard of DeepSeek, which came out a few months ago and really raised eyebrows because of, what was reported as a much more efficient way that they created the model. So way less inputs in money, time, computing power, all that stuff, and still really, really good results. Meta is doing a ton of stuff, the Facebook parent company. Google's catching up too with Gemini and all their stuff. So I'd say the state of the race remains fairly similar to how it was in the latter part of last year. But the thing to note with this stuff is it's not really gradual. There's kind of these bursts of advancements that tend to spring up a bit unpredicted. And that's because of the way the technology works. They're refining things and they're coming up with new incremental fixes. You and I probably wouldn't feel that in a day-to-day using it, but sometimes there's like a new model or they 10x or 100x the amount of something, or somebody comes up with a really groundbreaking new way to do something, and then you get like this burst of new abilities, and then everybody kind of catches up. So that's kind of how I feel like it's moving. We haven't had one of those in a little bit here, so maybe we're due. I don't have any insights there, but that's kind of how I would characterize AI in general. And then for the grant writing space or grant professional space, I think you're starting to see more tools that are focused on this work.
Yeah, I've seen like a lot of people. I feel like everybody in this is getting one, right? Like using it and realizing like, oh, like I can just like build this thing or whatever. So it's quite interesting that I was like, okay, so how is that impacting Grantable? And you're like, actually, we're growing too. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense, right? And I think too, part of it is people are becoming a little bit more familiar with AI and being like, oh, okay, it's not just like this weird, sexy thing
Mhm.
that is just like going to show up and disappear, but it's here to stay. And we need to kind of learn it. But I wonder too, like this is a thought that I've had too, is with everything going on with grants in 2025 so far, like some people are like, ooh, I might not be able to hire that full-time grant writer. So should I lean into AI? Is that going to save me time? So, and I know you and I are both like really big on first you need a human to understand like the processes of it to be able to use it properly. But that's why we like our master grant application template, right? Then use AI with it, right? But like, can you kind of tell me, like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I love this question. So I think related to the previous topic that we were just on, that all these new companies coming out presenting a AI for grants solution to you. I would say you got to be really careful when you are using this stuff, in the sense that for folks that for folks that don't come from the grants sector or the grant experience,
Mm-hmm.
they are going to see the work. They're going to look at AI and go, "Oh my gosh, I can solve this. I can create an easy button for this," you know. And then they will go and they will build it. And today it is, you can build software very quickly. So you can
Mm-hmm.
build the front end, you can build the website, add all the buttons and the views. You can make that stuff really quickly, and then connect it with OpenAI or Anthropic and have it do really cool things. And that there's very little friction there now. And so they go and they build it. And the philosophy is like, oh, if I build it, they will come. Or, oh, it looks like the problem is so simple. And here's the solution for you, the easy button.
Yeah.
What we learn is that reality is still reality, and grants are really challenging. There's a reason why you have all your students. There's a reason why they come to you to learn. And
Yeah.
there's a reason why their first grant that they ever do, even for a client, and their 50th grant, they're going to be a lot better at the 50th grant because they learned and they had all that experience. And so, bringing back to the human element, will it save me time? Yes, if you know how to use it. No, if you get kind of if you get tricked by the glittery easy button and what looks really good at first, upon closer inspection, isn't actually that good. It's like really cheap anything, cheap clothes, cheap furniture, cheap food, cheap things that you're like, oh wow, hey, that's a really cool jacket, and it's so affordable. I'm gonna get that, and it looks great on the rack. It looks great in the store. You're like, oh wow, great, and then you buy it and you wear it out, and the button rips off, or this, there's threads that are hanging loose everywhere, and you realize, oh my gosh, I should have just gotten a quality thing in the first place. There's that phenomenon in AI times 1,000, because what happens is it creates a lot of stuff so quickly, and it looks good and it sounds authoritative and confident. And you go, oh my gosh, I'm stunned. But just try to remember that's what's happening. And the speed is really part of the illusion. And then
Mm-hmm.
go in and like critique it. And you'll realize sometimes, yeah, it's really good until a point and you go, oh, okay, well, that's not exactly true. And oh, that's not what I meant for it to say. And oh, this whole section is, off in the wrong direction. So
Yeah.
that's really where I think a lot of folks are going to find themselves, unfortunately, with chatbots like the big popular ones like Claude and ChatGPT. It's a wow experience up front, and then you go and you try to use ChatGPT or Claude to get all the way through a big grant application, and you realize, oh my gosh, after 10 chats, Claude is taking a long time and kind of forgetting stuff that
Yeah.
we were talking about earlier, or like going off track or switching tone or voice, and you're like, oh, okay, this is getting a little bit less helpful as I'm going in further. So
Yeah.
I think the way that I'll wrap it up is that our perspective, at least at Grantable, and this has always been our philosophy, is, grants, imagine their step A to Z, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to skip B through Y, or, you want to get from A to B, save 90% of that time. Then B to C, save 90% of that time. We want to help you go through the steps faster. We don't want to help you skip the steps that are really important. So,
Mm-hmm.
like, you can save a lot of time, but it's not by eliminating all the judgment points in the process of a human helping to create a grant application or helping an organization to apply for a grant. So we want to get rid of that busy work and compress that time for you, but there's still a process that is really, really important. And that's the hard part of what we're doing and building this technology. We're trying to really deeply understand how people are actually doing their work, where they need to make those micro adjustments. And then we have to create the software that allows for that huge amount of flexibility and fine tuning all the way throughout. So then we help you go through the process faster, but we're not just skipping steps, because always what you figure out is when you skip the steps, you suddenly realize I have to go back. And then it's more work to fix and untangle this big thing that AI created than if you had just created it sequentially the way that you were going to, but maybe faster, and you're flowing through it. You're kind of fast forwarding with AI help, but you're not skipping. You're guiding it. You're not taking shortcuts. So I think that's really the landscape, not only for AI grant tools, but AI tools in general. I would say for all kinds of stuff where you're creating something, there's going to be products that look really good and shiny, and they're over promising, and they'll leave you in a place where you're like, this is actually not, it's having trouble getting that last 10% polish here. It's just leaving me sort of in this middle mediocre zone. And then there are going to be really great products where the teams are building something of really high quality, and they'll figure out how to use AI and traditional design techniques to give you a really wonderful tool. So that's what we're aspiring to be. But I think that's how I'm seeing the landscape kind of, it's becoming, we have choice now, which is a great thing, but it comes with this other side. You have to be what's the word? You have to be like a discerning consumer, a discerning practitioner of grant work. And so you need to choose your tools really well and learn how to critique them.
Right. And that's so good. And what I really love about that, what you were talking about, is the analogy. Like, I think that's the best analogy I've ever heard about quality with AI. About like cheap clothes, cheap things. Like, I was so spot on, and I have never heard that.
We were just talking about Temu before you hit record, remember? So that's probably why it's in my head. I was just like, yeah. I mean, it's so attractive to like push buy, right? When you see it on that app and you're like, oh, it's so cheap and it looks so good, and then you get it and you're like, oh, okay, it'll maybe work, but yeah, depending on the occasion. Yeah, maybe not for your wedding or for like but like Halloween party, sure, whatever. But
right, or just to be a sustainable buyer, like, you know what I mean? Like, I look at that and I'm like, wow, like, we're just such like consumers and we want it all, and then it like falls apart and we're filling our land dump and all the things. But like, that's such a good analogy for AI, because it's the same thing. It's like, as you mentioned, because I just had someone in our mentorship program yesterday. She's writing a grant. She goes, she's scolding Claude. Why is Claude doing me this way today? Right? Like, AI is also getting kind of funky. I've been hearing a lot of reports in the last few days, like, ooh, AI is getting a little weird. It's giving me the wrong information consistently, or it's like sideways stuff that's not usually what I get.
Well,
And I'm like,
OpenAI had to roll back a release because of that. There was sycophancy. It was just like not helping. It was just being like totally sycophantic to the users, and you're like, hey, come on, like, tell me the right thing. I don't want to just have you tell me I'm right or whatever. So yeah, it's very, very, it's eerie almost that we're interacting and relying increasingly on this tech that has such variability and volatility. So yes, your student or your cohort member there was spot on. It actually, while you were just sharing that, it made me think of another thing in terms of when you're talking about sustainable consumption. One of
Mhm.
the other things that we're getting ready to talk about more, Grantable is getting a new look, and so we're very excited. We're going to talk about a lot more of our work in cool ways. One of them is the environmental aspects of AI usage, and we get a lot of questions about, especially from our nonprofit users. Hey, what are the environmental impacts of AI? And we dug into this, and we actually did the work of kind of figuring out how to give people a good answer, and we came up with something really interesting, which is that if you're using Grantable, you probably will use far less electricity and computing power than if you use a chatbot, which is really, it wasn't something that we intended to do. We didn't intend to be wasteful, but we weren't thinking about the environmental impact when we were building the tool. But because we've built it in a way where we want you to be efficient with the way you use it, what we now realize is that when you interact with ChatGPT or Claude, every prompt that you give it on a chat thread, you think you're just talking to it like you're talking to a person, one chat, but it's computing the whole chat thread every single time you communicate with it. And then every time it's probably producing something, so it lengthens that total amount of text. Then you say something back and it lengthens it more. And every single time it's trying to understand what you're saying and creating stuff, it's taking into account, it's recalculating every single token throughout the whole chat thread, which is why it gets slower. And there's
Mhm.
even now kind of little prompts that say, hey, you should start a new chat thread if this one starts to get kind of long, because you're actually asking it to do more and more and more computation as the conversation gets longer. And what also happens is, because there's so much math happening, there's more opportunities for it to go sideways. So a lot of folks will probably notice that you kind of hit this plateau where it stops kind of giving you as full or as helpful of an answer. It takes longer, it has errors. And so that's how most people are using AI. And even for a little tiny change, like, at the end, you're actually asking it to recalculate the entire chat conversation. And if you use Grantable, what we're doing is we're using a mix of different models. So the high powered ones for drafting, the low powered ones for sort of subtasks. And then we're also just sending little fragments of text from your source material or just the question and getting these little chunks. So it's much more economical, and you're not running through one big, huge, long chat every single time you interact with the chatbot. So on an individual level, it can really add up to like a household level of electricity, but at a society wide or like an industry wide level, I think that's really actually an amount of resource, like actual electricity out there, and water used to cool the data centers and all kinds of stuff like that, that we're very far removed from. But that element is also something that people have been asking about. And I think is really interesting too, just thinking about efficiency and how we use these tools and how we learn to use them efficiently, and to understand when they're acting up.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And we have been having people, grant writers, to ask about that. Like, I don't know how ethical I feel about this because it's taking, like, you know what I mean? Like with AI,
Mm-hmm.
or how does that really affect? Because of these data centers are growing so fast. And like you said, there's an
Yeah.
environmental impact that a lot of people don't even know about. So I'm glad that nonprofits are bringing that up, and that you're
Mm-hmm.
finding like, oh my gosh, like because of the way we do this, it's actually less energy than these other open source or other places, right? So that's so interesting. So thank you for bringing that up, because I don't think people think, really, a lot of people may not think about that, right? Because it's not in your face.
I'll share the whatever we really want to actually talk about this more. So I'll let you know when it
Yeah.
comes out. But yeah, it's cool to know how these things work, and then we can use them a little more responsibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so going back to like everything going on right now and like what your thoughts are, like you have more users coming. I know in the green room we were talking and you're saying like we have bigger industries coming, like universities, governments, like these other places. So do you feel like people are just it's more aware of that these tools do work, there's a little more trust in them, or do you feel like because of everything going on right now they're trying to save budget too, like with this, like what are your thoughts on some of what you're seeing?
I think it's a little bit of all those things that you mentioned. AI is just sort of getting out there and becoming accepted. Most people have had some interaction with it now, right? They've tried it for the most
Mhm.
part. When I first started talking about this in 2023, maybe like 5 or 10% of the rooms that I'd have been in would have raised their hands and said, "Yeah, I messed around with it," or very few people had applied it to grant work. Now, I mean, I would say the majority have shifted have tried it, and it's the small minority that are like, "Oh no, I just haven't at all," or and a lot of those folks have some kind of a principled reason. They're just like, "Hey, I don't dig this, and I'm not going to use it," which is totally a fine perspective to have. So I think a lot of it is just that people have encountered it in so many parts of their lives. Maybe they Googled something and they saw the little AI preview thing at the top, or so I think it's becoming accepted. And then once people start to understand a little bit better what it does well, I think it's only a matter of time before somebody that's responsible for the grant seeking in your government office, your university, your grant agency, your nonprofit is like, "Hey, I wonder what would happen if I asked ChatGPT to, revise this section for me." And it's like, "Oh, hey, that was pretty good." And like, it saved me 15 minutes right there. And then they start doing it and they go, like now it's getting a little bit cumbersome to copy and paste. And every time I'm spinning up a new chat and it's kind of inconsistent. I wonder if there's anything out there for, grants. And then they listen to your podcast and they hear about Grantable and then they check it out and they're like, "Oh yeah, this makes sense. This is like what I was looking for, so I can, organize my content." Right? So I think we still aren't advertising, like we're not paying for any advertisements. So it really is kind of word of mouth and
Yeah.
people, our community here is it's very community based. It's very
Mhm.
sharing,
Yeah.
in terms of knowledge and resources and support. So I think probably a lot of those channels are where people are discussing this stuff. And then I think the last thing is, I think there's always been a lot of busy work or redundancy in the space that we've all complained about, like
Yeah.
word counts, character limits. Why are you making me say this again here? Okay, why can't I just submit this form description that I have? You're making me do it special just for you. So there's always been a lot of that in terms of
Yeah.
the format of grant applications. And so I think that was built up. And so there's this huge stockpile of work that really is just busy work or is very, very rote and kind of time consuming in our
Mhm.
space. So it was
Yeah.
kind of waiting for this problem. And while there are some really, I would say, toxic applications of large language models that we're seeing in terms of, fake images and, fake agents and things kind of messing with
Fake
society.
insert.
Fake,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think squishing down a word count or readjusting some phrasing to repurpose good writing for a different funder is a great application that really just has a lot of upside, very little like harm potential for causing harm. And then because we're not concerned as much in grant seeking with like the originality of the characters and the plot and all that kind of stuff. We're really about completeness, conciseness. How compelling is it? How well does it align with the rubric or the funding criteria? So it's stuff that AI is really good at helping us to
Yeah.
adhere to and to follow, and was maybe difficult on on its own. So I think it's just that it's a really well matched tech for the space that we're in. And so I think that's why we're seeing this kind of swell of people coming in and looking. The last thing also too might just be all of the political spotlight, where a lot of people never knew how important grants are, how much funding goes out as grant funding, from federal to state to local to private to corporate. And they kind of knew, oh yeah, somebody I know, a friend of mine works on grants, or yeah, my friend that works at nonprofits applying for a grant, but didn't know about it. And now there's so much more unfortunate attention to all the cancellations and the programs going under, and people are realizing how important this work is. So I think it might just be on people's minds, maybe more than it's ever been before, at least in our sort of collective consciousness.
That's so, yeah, it's so interesting. And I think so too. And even if it's like there's negative space around it, it can also inspire positivity and then awareness of this is a part of the economy. And oh, is there something out there for me? Right. So I think just like knowing, like, okay, this is actually a thing and this is a huge industry and this does matter. Like, let me get into it. So I like that take on it too, and seeing more people come to AI as well. And like you said, and like we've always said, like you need to know how to write grants, as far as like what the program design. Because I would say a grant writer really isn't just a grant writer. It's just the lazy way to call it that. But you and I have talked about this before too. And this is what we always say in our program is you're actually a grant strategist. And now even in 2025, we've been pulling in you're a grant and funding strategist, because even, and it's been interesting. So we've had our master grant application template. We've always said you could repurpose into then applications, right? And that's a great place where then don't start with AI, but then utilize it once you understand. Then that can help with those character counts and rephrase, you're right, all the things that you talked about. But also we're saying you can also then repurpose this into a corporate solicitation letter, into a funding, you know what I mean, appeal letter, like all of the things, because then you're aligned with what you actually understand and want to do, instead of trying to create a different program then for a fundraiser and a different ask for, you know what I mean? But everything's aligned. So I really like that AI can be helpful in those tools as well, right? When you have something that you've developed and you really understand the need for, and then to help with, like you said, those tough times of like, oh, this is just going to save me time just to be able to have it do this because it has the language that I need, right? Yeah.
Hopefully it even gives people a little bit more of their time and energy back to focus on the things that you just enumerated there, like getting to the foundations of what are we saying, where are we going, who are we applying for, and why, the strategy. A lot of times there's so much, or in the past, there's been so much of the work that we just get tired or we just get lost in the trees, right? And the strategy it's almost like something that you have to come up for air every once in a while and remember. Like you know it at the front, you maybe come up in the middle and you're like, okay, are we still on track? And then right before submitting it, you're kind of just like, is everything in alignment, all that stuff? So maybe hopefully now, if you're not exerting so much effort just to put the words on the page, then there's actually this kind of a different way that can start to emerge, where a grant and funding strategist is really able to kind of stay above and help the client or the team to create that application without becoming exhausted, without going under the waves, but being able to float on top of it a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that is exactly what happens. And they even have back, like a lot of people, they still do this and I don't do that. But back in the day, this was really popular. Submit a 2-page LOI and send it out to 100 places, right? And they're just doing, like you said, like, don't do that. Y'all, don't do that. You cannot build relationships that way. That boom, kind of like.
I guarantee you. I guarantee you there's going to be a company, if there isn't already, there's going to be an AI grant company that does that. I promise you.
100%.
It's going to be like, and they're going to try to make it for as little input up front, and will promise you. So like, just put in your website, like put in your website here, tell us your name and put in your mission. We'll write 100 LOIs for you
We'll
for
sell it to you like
$10,
it's a good thing.
and we'll shoot these out. I promise you, there's going to be a company that's doing that, if not already. And I'm with you. It wasn't a good idea before, and it's not a good idea with AI now. It's really, that's the kind of stuff where it's like overfishing, right? It's like you're going
Yeah.
to just ruin the ecosystem that's like in balance, and then funders will go like, okay, this is obnoxious, we won't have open LOIs anymore because we're just getting spammed with this stuff. So we all have to be kind of responsible about how we're creating the norms. So like
Yeah.
we need to know, hey, that's not cool, like don't do that, right? And you're always going to have some folks that don't adhere or see an opportunity, but I'm with you on that. I think
It's
that's
not
not
gonna
the
work.
right
Yeah.
way. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not gonna
So
work. It's just, yeah. And, and they're going to market it like it's the thing to do. I'm like, don't fall for it. Because right now, especially, are times of creating relationships, right? So when,
yes,
like you said, then if you can have a little more time, then because it's, you don't have to spend an hour redoing the word count or whatever. Instead, you can just, go out there and call a foundation, right? Like go out there and meet, like think about the strategy in a different way and have that at the forefront. Like that's where you're going to be successful, not just like fire hosing 2-page LOIs to thousands of foundations. Like they're going to, and even we do unlimited grant reviews, right, in the academy. And what we've been doing, all of us that are reviewing, the co-coaches and everybody that's reviewing and giving feedback, we can see AI a mile away. So when we're doing reviewers, we're like, okay, you can tell AI, like we even give coaching on that. You can tell AI wrote this. We'll just tell people and we'll like rewrite it. Like you need to add some human element. Like if I can read it, if I can see it, like, and it's so glaringly obvious, like you need to rework it a little bit. Like you said, that cheap shirt so that we're seeing. So how does Grantable kind of like, because there's more decisions, do you feel like you have more human
mm-hmm.
tone then? Like,
That's
can we talk
it.
about that? Yeah.
You just it's not rocket science, right? Like I tell you what, it isn't. It's not a secret line of code that we've created where it's like sound human, right? Like it's just what you just said. It's decisions. Like
Yeah.
if you did that jokey software we were just talking about, you didn't make any decisions other than to buy the thing, right? Like if
Yeah.
you put in your mission statement, you click buy, and it fires off 100 LOIs. What thinking or judgment? Zero, nothing, except maybe one bad decision up front. But if
Right.
you
Right.
go and you the old way of grant writing, right? Like where you are literally crafting every word you write is a micro decision, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
wordsmithing that's happening. So maybe that level isn't as necessary now because we do have these tools that can help you write. And honestly, for some people, it can help them write at a higher level. Writing is a tough thing. And some people, this can help them write at a level of polish that is maybe would be achievable eventually, but isn't right now. It can help them raise the quality of their writing. But the decision making is still those people that maybe can't say it in that glittering way that an experienced grant writer can. They know though when they read something whether or not that thing is really singing. So that executive director or that development director or that volunteer that has just been thrown into grant writing,
Yeah.
and it doesn't know how to. They know they know good writing or they know good expression when they encounter it in the world. And so that's still judgment now. So that's still where that human element and that authenticity comes out. It's going in a direction, following a narrative, choosing stories and data and examples, putting it in sequence in a way that makes sense and feels natural because you're a human being doing this from your experience. It's intuitive and it's authentic to you and the organization and the work. All of that stuff gets lost if you just have an AI, churn it out for you. And so we are creating Grantable in a way that it does have a lot of controls. Like you can toggle on and off different sources. There's different ways to prompt. There's different ways to experience the AI. We have a chat where you can talk to it like a person and ask for strategic advice. But we also have this thing in line, like on the page, where if you just want drafting or revisions or changing lengths and all that stuff, you're not chatting with it. You're using it more like just a writing tool. So it's separating it out. And the reason we're doing that is so that you think differently about how you're using the tool. Do you need strategic partnership right now, or do you just need the thing to be shorter? And like those are two different ideas or two different mental states. But the important thing is the human is the one choosing which tool to use. Like, okay, let me stop for a second. Let me get some ideas. Let me think on these ideas and turn one of those ideas into the thing that I want it to be on the page. So if you're making hundreds or thousands of little micro decisions, even if you're using AI, then the thing that comes out, especially if you're reading it as you're creating it, it sounds good to you, then it's going to sound good to the review committee, then it's going to sound good to the funder, right?
Yeah.
But if you didn't work on it and it just came out, then it's going to probably sound kind of hollow and kind of like all the other stuff, right?
But
So
now we can,
it's not.
we can even identify it. We're like, yeah, this is AI.
Yeah,
like you just know.
yeah.
It's
You
so
just
bizarre.
know, right?
Yeah.
And people ask all the time. They're like, okay, "What if they're using AI detectors?" And the AI detector is probably the person, because those things don't work very well.
No, they don't.
They operate on the same technology. It's the funniest thing. They're using the same things to detect the AI itself. So it's like, yeah, this is AI, or no, it's not, and it doesn't really, And then if it's both, where's the line? The real AI detector is, I think it's like what your team is doing. It's like, does this feel effortless? Like, does this feel careless? Am I reading this and the person that gave it to me didn't put any sort of work into this? And you just start to feel that after a little while. So I think we're still able to sense that, which is a good thing, I think.
And I think it's mainly like, and the other thing too is sometimes we'll be like to your point, this writing, the sentences are very hard to read. You might want to put it through AI just to kind of polish it up, right?
Yeah.
So there's a part of that too where it's like, we're not like saying don't use it, but at the same time, we're like, we know like you didn't think this through. Like we can see it. It's so weird, right? It's like but if you're using it just to get a better grant, I'm not necessarily going to know that, right? Which is quite interesting. Quite interesting.
I mean, I'm working on writing a book right now, and like I've actually wrestled with this. At first I held myself off from using AI, which is ironic because the book is about AI and it's about the nonprofit sector and in the future. And I realized I wasn't using it because in my ego, I was imagining myself being celebrated as a great writer. And I think I'm a pretty good writer, but then, I was there really fixated on trying to write these gorgeous prose, and like that became why I was doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And I just realized, okay, you know what? The thing that I really care about here is getting this core idea out into the world fast, because I think AI really is going to cause some really huge disruptions. And I want the nonprofit sector to play a huge role in how we address that. So I have a matter of months that I think this thing needs to get out. I have a normal day job and a family and all that stuff. So I'm going to let go of this ego part where it's like, I want to be like, Yuval Harari and like all my heroes. That's not who I am in this world. I do have this idea that I want people to absorb and enjoy reading. So then I let AI in and I use it like you said. Sometimes I will hammer away on a paragraph and all the parts are there, but it's like, it's off balance. And then, and then AI will go over it and maybe I'll take one of the sentences or a couple or all of them and just say, oh yeah, those are my ideas, but they're like, fixed in sort of the frame, and that's how I wanted it. And the resolution I've made is that I'm going to document my process in the forward and just say, hey, my point here was not to be, it was to create a really enjoyable reading experience for you, to authentically represent my own ideas to you. But here's how I used AI, and it was to get this idea out to you quickly in this way, and to almost demonstrate part of the point of the book, which is how powerful this stuff is and how much it's going to change a lot of what we do. So, just the meta pull back the curtain here. I was a grant professional, as you know, but I'm still writing and I'm working on this company. But even in my own work and in my own life, it's showing up in these ways that I'm still navigating. How comfortable do I feel with this? How do I put work out into the world and my ideas out into the world with AI assistance, with AI, taking my words, and instead of me being the author, really, one paragraph, I'm the full on author, but the next paragraph, I'm the editor, and I flip that role and I'm like kind of making that editorial decision. And so we're co-writing it in a way, and we're handing off back and forth. So it really is it's an interesting um, new threshold that we're crossing here. The ideas still have to be mine though. Like if I just say, hey, where are we going? It can't even get me like, very far at all, because it doesn't know the big vision, the context, or how I want this to be. But it is really helpful in that sort of getting through the next step oftentimes. And I think there's a lot of lessons there for grant pros too.
Yeah, I love, what I really enjoy about you, Phil, is you're so thoughtful. Like all the things that you do, and then I hear your thought process behind it, and it's so refreshing. So I also wanted to say that because it's so nice. Yeah, like just like that. I'm like, you're like, well, this I don't want to do this. My ego is here, but like now I'm the editor, and I'm like, well, and I'm going to put it in the prologue now to explain. I love that about you. Like it's so nice to see that your
It's
brain in the thought process.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you that's a very nice thing to say. I just think like that's the work, right? Is the
Yeah.
thinking when it comes to any of our jobs. And, if you do some of that work and then you can share that out, that's as much as the book itself and the ideas in it, I hope are going to be thought provoking. Even the process. I mean, like, I'm using the deep research feature in ChatGPT, so I'll come to a chapter and to start a chapter, and I'll work with AI to create a really extensive prompt. So I have the AI write its own prompt, and we go back. We'll have a whole chat just to get it right, and then there's this cool feature that goes and creates a deep research report with real citations and links that work. You still have to check all of them to see kind of
Oh
what kind of
yeah.
source it is,
You need to check them.
but it's really something that was one of the most anxiety producing parts of my attempt to write a book. Was I have not done that kind of research before, and I don't have a
Mm,
lot of extra time. And so I
yeah.
was really worried because I wanted to write about things where I don't have deep expertise, and I would have needed to go out and find, an extra 20 hours a week from somewhere, which I don't
Right.
have, to like research these things. And this is now helping me do it. So what I get is in about 15 minutes, I'll get a pretty in-depth, anywhere from 15 to 30 page report. And I print it out and I read it and I annotate it. So then I'm now learning and
Mhm.
going through, and it's just sped up my ability to then take that content and then apply it to the book. So I also want to include some of that. So I'll actually show some of the outputs eventually,
Mhm.
like maybe on a website or in the book, but I want to like show the research report, the prompt, and then
Yeah.
the report that was
Very
generated, and then
cool.
all my little like scribbles all over it. And so
Yeah.
again, it's like pulling back the curtain. How did
Yeah.
one guy with part time create a book that would maybe have taken, a guy with full time and maybe a research team or a budget for research.
Yeah.
And like now with AI, we're able to do that kind of stuff, but you still have to be really thoughtful. It's still maybe one of the hardest projects that I've ever done, but
Yeah.
it's feasible now because of this tool in a way that I don't know. It would have taken me, years to do it in without. So
And things could change too. So it's like
things
speed to
could
market,
change.
right? With tech. I know my friend, he wrote a book on Google Glasses, right? Back in the day. Yeah. So, and it was so good, and he had it, and it was like, yes, this is great. And then the next day, it's like nobody's using Google Glasses anymore. Like tech and books, like speed to market is very important, because things change so fast, right? They change so fast. So
I just
like
realized you're an author. I should really be seeking some guidance and encouragement,
like,
and accountability from you. Yeah.
I'm like hearing
It's
you, and I'm like,
hard.
because as an author, I'm very interested in what you're doing. I have not leaned into AI at all with my even my articles. Like I'm probably more of the quote unquote late adopter to certain things. I use it for my business and other things, but my ego is probably a little too big because I've been an author for so long. But
it's real. It's real. Sometimes when AI writes it better than I do, I'm like, oh, what am I even doing? But yeah, it's a real trip there. And I think like the only thing I could think of is just to own it and just to share it out there and say like, yeah, it was better than me, at least in the time that I have. It was better than I could have done for this paragraph, and that's it. Like I just, as long as, I think the one thing to not do is to claim that I did it with, oh yeah.
Right.
Like Instagram culture, just show the world your best face and hide the, like that's not what I'm about here. So hopefully, I'm sure I will get some critique eventually where people say, oh, you didn't even write this. Like, anyone could do this. But
I think
I'm going to just show, I'll just show my work. I think that's really the point here.
And there's some real like precedent. Like I have an editor now, right? And she, even just for my articles that I publish, God, I should have been using AI the whole time, like we've been around, because like my grammar is not the best, right? So even just like on simple things like that. But even through that process, it's like I'm learning so much, like to get her feedback, to integrate it, not just that it's done and I don't see that interactive period. So it's actually been really good. But at some point, it's probably like, yeah, that's a big expense, right? It's resources. It takes time. She doesn't do it in 15 minutes. She needs a week to get back to me, right? Like all of the things, like, but that leads me into another question. All right. So I have, or more of like a thought, because I've been hearing this. And at first I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. But the more I think about it, I'm not sure I fully buy into it. And this is what I hear. I hear some people say, especially for grant writers, if you're not using AI, you're losing out, you're falling behind, right? And at first I was like, well, maybe because you could write and maybe you have, like what we talked about, you have more time to strategize. Like if you're using it properly, maybe you're falling. But then I was like, I've been a grant writer for more than 20 years. I've still been able to get millions and millions of dollars for nonprofits. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily true that if you don't use it, you're falling behind, but you could just be more efficient. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm sure you've kind of heard that too, maybe out there thrown around.
I would say if you forced me into true or false, I would say more true than false.
Okay,
but
this is interesting. I like our tea today.
I would. It's here's how I was thinking about it. So it's not about the main thing you hear is like saving time. Like, oh, save time, easier. What if you hold time constant? Okay, so let's say that I spend an hour working on a grant or whatever it is, no AI, and I'm good at grants and I get how far I get in an hour. What if I spend an hour working on the grant with AI? So it's not about turning that hour of work into 5 minutes. It's about what can I do with an hour with myself and AI. And what I'm finding is you can really level up. You can really augment, the quality or the scope or the depth in a different dimension, whatever you want. If you're a skilled practitioner and then you add that to your practice and then you still apply the full force of your intellect with skillful use of the tool, I mean, that's what I was kind of seeing with the book, which is like, I think I'm a decent writer. I've written a lot, old school way. So I like doing it. I like the thought process. I like how it clarifies my thinking. And so I'm still trying to do that. And now what I'm learning to do is add in AI assisted research. I'm learning how to have AI help me as a co-writer or an editor and how to trade off in those roles and then come out. I'm still reading the final product over and over and over to just get it the right way, the same way that I was doing before. But what I am finding is I'm able to write on more topics, more authoritatively. It's helping me learn much more quickly just because I didn't know where to look for the information. I would have had to organize the information. And, so weeks potentially of that time for me compressed and helped. But now I get to read the stuff and learn it, right away in flow. So that's why I would say if you forced me to pick, it's more true than false because of how all the ways that you can use it to augment your thinking and your work. That said, I do think it has the other side of it, which is there are ways in which it starts to shortcut thinking. And one of the things that I see that I'm starting to see, in my company, and I think I'm guilty of this as well, but sometimes AI can draft the thing in 2 seconds. And then what we start to see is people sharing the AI, oh, here it is. I took the transcript of the meeting and I put it in and I asked for the proposal and here it is. What do you think? And then it becomes this circle of what do you think? What do you think? People are sort of passing around thinking. Nobody wants to read the thing, and, do the thought on should we talk about pricing already, or is this more of like an idea conversation that we're about to have with the client? AI doesn't know that. Maybe AI just put in a price, or maybe it didn't. Like, what do you do? And it gets passed around, and people are like, yeah, what do you think? Oh, yeah, it looks good to me. What do you think? And it's like nobody's doing the think. And so I think there's a double edge there, because if your team suddenly starts to be able to shortcut thinking and judgment work, which it also allows, then you can start to dull that skill. And then very, very subtly, like we all get sort of you live in a warm climate, so do I. Have you ever started like you don't have AC for a while and then you go into a room with air conditioning and you're like, oh, I remember this is pretty nice. And then you just start trying to like get a little bit addicted to it and like, oh, I kind of like this. I'm just going to stay in this cafe. I'm going to stay in this store for a minute. And I think it has the same kind of that allure. Like you start to lean on AI for its ease and its assistance. And then after a while, you kind of, you slump a little bit and you avoid the work of thinking through something mundane or something that's very formulaic that you've done many times, but needs to get done with some human thought through it. So I think there's two sides to it. So I that's why I say it's not just like a resounding yes, you're falling behind. But I do think that when you have somebody with your skills, for example, Holly, and if you were just given a college semester to figure out how to level up your practice with all of these kind of AI tools and people helping you to learn how to use them effectively, I think you come out of there, with quite a few advantages to pre-AI. So that's what I would say.
That's fair. I like it. True, but with some disclaimers, right?
Yeah. And that's for the state now. The last thing I'll say on this is some of the responses too are like, oh, AI will never be able to XYZ. That's a sentence that I always try to do a gentle challenge on, which is, hey, that might be a really feel good sentence to say.
Yeah.
Um, it's a soothing kind of behavior. What I would say is hopefully a more helpful framing is, how would AI be able to do that? What would it take for AI to be able to XYZ? So
Right.
then you can maybe assure yourself that, hey, that's a pretty long way off, or, there are some pretty big gaps. Like, why will AI not be able to do this ever? And so
Right.
really to understand what is that special thing that you are able to do that this technology isn't, and also, how can you maybe realize there are some aspects of that work that would be really helpful to have
Yeah.
assistance on. So rather than kind of just assuming that, it's not, I tried it once and it was
Right.
terrible. Well,
Right.
careful, because it's getting really good really quickly. We have these bursts of improvement. There are people out there that are not saying it will never be able to do it. They are asking the question, well, how would I do X,
Right.
Y, Z? And so if you ask the same question of yourself, I think it just helps to lean into your curiosity as a
Mm.
way to stay agile and stay in true safety as much as possible, and in true control over your business, over your work, your life, your sector, your community. It's not a service to yourself to make these
Right.
assumptions about a technology that is so new. There's so much investment in it. It is changing so quickly. There are really, really big things, I think. And so just to say, oh, it's fine, I would just say, what if? How?
Right.
How would?
Nothing's static
Prompt
anymore. I feel like
prompt yourself.
assumptions are sideways out the window and
Yes,
things are
yes,
changing so fast,
yeah,
right? Like, so
yeah,
it is like, I like that thought. And that's kind of what I've kept is like curiosity, right? Like, okay, how can this, and I think that's been really helpful coming
yeah.
in with that type of, but yeah, I was kind of like, okay, because there's been like these strongest, like, use it or you're never going to be good. And it's like, well, that's not true. And then it's like, or it will never do this and I can never use it because it's always going to be bad. Well, that's not true either. So it's like, yeah, it's a very interesting time where I think,
Let's
yeah.
if I can, I think a really, really good metaphor and analogy for this. It shouldn't be a debate, but the
Right.
difference might be like sewing by hand or sewing with a sewing machine. So
Mm-hmm.
it there are some things where you really appreciate that it's a handmade, it has little imperfections, and then the whole thing is this incredibly high quality, piece of a product that somebody that's very skillful has made. But that person cannot create clothing as quickly as somebody with a sewing machine. It's just not possible. So if you are in the business of creating affordable t-shirts, you're not going to be doing it by hand. If you're in the business of creating like really boutique, custom, bespoke hats or shirts or whatever, then that is what you need to do. And
Yeah.
maybe you don't use the machine, or maybe you use it on particular pieces of what you're doing. It's not a you will fall behind because you're not using the sewing machine. It's what is your craft? What is your audience? What are
Ooh,
people
that's good.
asking of you? And it's a
Yeah.
really, and even a sewing machine, you don't just let it go, you're guiding it. So
You're creating
it's
the
the
patterns,
person,
right?
you're
Yeah.
creating the
Yeah.
patterns, and there's still an art to it. There's a real art to being able to do that well. So it's a
Yeah.
very close analogy, at least right now, to how do you do something manually on your own versus using an AI to help you go more quickly. Whatever your purpose is, whatever your role, and whatever the person you're working with is expecting of you, if it's speed and affordability just to start, then maybe you really do want to consider helping AI or having AI help you to do that. But if it
Right.
is something really custom, and like there's an importance to it not being formulaic, or the providence of those ideas is really, really important, that it's coming from you or coming from people only, then you don't want to use AI. And then you won't fall behind. Of course, you'll actually ruin the thing if that's really important to the product. So when people say you'll fall behind, I mean, maybe what they're doing is soothing themselves and saying, I'm worried about falling behind, so I'm going to tell other people that what I'm doing is right because I'm using AI. So therefore I won't fall behind. But, you know, it's really not about that. It's really about looking at, what are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? What do I need to do to get there? Like, don't worry about falling behind too much. Like, what are you making? Who are you serving? Who are you trying to help? What do they need and what do they expect? What are their constraints? And then figure out what you're doing. So I still really love the sewing machine analogy was one I wrote about a couple of years ago, and I still think it's so on, because there are some paragraphs in my book where it's hand stitched, and then there are some paragraphs where I use the machine, and you know I got that stitch a lot faster. So it's a combination.
It is. I like that we're talking about clothes so much.
Yeah, that was work that into the episode title. Yeah, right.
I was like, Columbus lost Timu. Oh no. So yeah. But such a great conversation today, Phil. It's always great when you come on. But like, man, today we went deep. We really got into it. And I love that, like, you know, you're still, just to like also talk about grants, like you're getting more and more subscribers. Like, people are going after grants still, everyone, in 2025. Like, they're still important. They're a part of the economy. You guys can definitely check out Grantable. Where can they find you, Phil? For people listening.
Grantable.co. Grantable, so grantable.co.
Perfect. So yeah, definitely go check it out. We also have links inside of our program because we partner with you all, because of the work that you guys are, this is heavy work. Like you said, you just hired, you have more people on your team. Like, it is a full thought process that you all are developing for this AI to work. So we appreciate that. So we don't have to do all of that. Come in and help us, right? And do some training and all of the things. So we really do appreciate all of the work that you're putting into this to help the sector. Absolutely.
Holly, we have your names and programs definitely on the board, and so hopefully folks will see a lot more cool collaborations that we can do coming up. And yeah, these podcasts, this one maybe this one is the new top. It's still just beating out another Holly podcast, but like, yeah, you know, this one was really good. Again, always at the top. Yeah, I think that's just it. I mean, now I kind of want to go back and listen to how many users we had on the first one, because we're about to cross 30,000. Yeah, it's just cool that time is passing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Phil, for coming on. So we'll go ahead and close out now. Once again, check out Grantable, all of the things that they're doing, and yeah, we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.
Amazing. Thanks, Holly.